nothing but a partisan hack, a conspiracy theorist with zero real law enforcement credentials. And you have absolutely no business whatsoever leading any FBI operations that could impact the security of this great nation we all call home. As a political analyst, deeply immersed in the intricacies of American governance and the often shadowy world of partisan battles that define our democracy, I must interject my own perspective here right from the outset, firmly believing that Dan Bongino's approach in this heated exchange represents a necessary reckoning for accountability in politics. Because in my view, rooted in years of observing how power corrupts those who wield it without checks, Bongino's reliance on documented facts over emotional rhetoric serves as a model for how public servants should defend their integrity against baseless attacks, ultimately exposing the hypocrisies that have long plagued figures like Hillary Clinton, who prioritize personal ambition over transparent leadership. Hillary Clinton's voice, sharpened by decades of navigating the treacherous waters of Washington politics, where alliances shift like sand in a desert storm, cut through the packed hearing room with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, capturing the undivided attention of every journalist, spectator, and camera lens focused on this high-stakes confrontation that promised to reshape public perceptions of both participants involved. The cameras from major networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, along with the live C-SPAN feed broadcasting to millions of viewers across the country who were glued to their screens during this pivotal moment in American political theater, zoomed in tightly on the unfolding drama, as reporters in the overflowing gallery leaned forward with bated breath, their fingers poised above keyboards, ready to immortalize what they anticipated would be the complete professional demolition of Dan Bongino by one of the most formidable figures in Democratic history. Dan Bongino, the conservative commentator who had transitioned from podcasting to a high-ranking role as Deputy FBI Director under the new administration, sat composed and solitary at the witness table, showing no signs of discomfort or unease as he absorbed the verbal assault, instead choosing to jot down a few notes on his legal pad while allowing a subtle, confident smile to crease his face, signaling to those watching closely that he viewed this as an opportunity rather than a threat. He did not flinch under the weight of her words, nor did he fidget in his seat or reach nervously for the glass of water placed strategically before him. And he certainly did not shuffle through his prepared papers in a display of anxiety that might have betrayed any inner turmoil, but rather he maintained an air of unshakable calm that suggested he had anticipated this exact line of attack and was fully prepared to turn it to his advantage. In that instant, as the tension in the room thickened like fog rolling in over a battlefield before dawn, it became evident to me as an observer with a keen eye for political strategy that Hillary Clinton had just committed what could only be described as the most grievous tactical error of her extensive and storied political career, one that would unravel her narrative in ways she could never have foreseen. The hearing itself had been convened by a congressional committee tasked with scrutinizing proposed reforms to the FBI under the current administration, which had promised sweeping changes to restore public trust in federal law enforcement agencies that many felt had been compromised by years of partisan interference and internal scandals. Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State who had twice run for the presidency and amassed a legacy of both remarkable achievements and persistent controversies that followed her like shadows in the midday sun, had specifically requested the opportunity to testify, seeing in this forum a golden chance to reclaim the spotlight and advance her ongoing narrative of victimhood and resilience. She perceived Dan Bongino, the outspoken conservative podcaster who had been appointed Deputy FBI Director by Trump ally Kash Patel, despite lacking traditional bureau experience, as the ideal target to dismantle, allowing her to portray him as woefully unqualified while simultaneously painting the entire administration as a corrupt enterprise driven by vengeance rather than merit or public service. By exposing what she saw as his inadequacies in front of a national audience hungry for political drama, she aimed to remind the American people of her own supposed superior qualifications and to subtly reinforce the argument that she had been robbed of the presidency through unfair means, thereby keeping her relevance alive in the ever-evolving landscape of democratic politics. She pressed her assault forward with a rising crescendo in her voice that demonstrated the practiced indignation she had honed over years of facing down opponents in debates, hearings, and campaign trails across the nation, declaring that his years spent on a podcast platform spreading what she termed as blatant lies, wild conspiracy theories, and dangerous misinformation about her personally had now inexplicably led to his reward of one of the most influential positions in American law enforcement, which she framed not as justice, but as a clear case of political revenge orchestrated by those who feared her influence. The gallery, filled with a mix of Democratic supporters, neutral observers, and a smattering of skeptics, who had come to witness what was billed as a clash of titans in the arena of public accountability, murmured their approval in low tones that rippled through the room like waves on a disturbed pond, as Democratic members of the committee nodded in agreement, convinced that this confrontation was unfolding precisely according to the script they had envisioned to bolster their party's narrative. Bongino, ever the picture of composure in situations designed to provoke emotional responses from even the most seasoned professionals, waited patiently until she had fully expended her opening salvo before responding, taking a deliberate and slow sip from his water glass to emphasize his lack of urgency or intimidation in the face of her barrage. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged calm, measured, and completely unrattled, carrying the authority of someone who had spent years in high-pressure environments where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. Thanking her sarcastically for what he called her gracious introduction, before pivoting smoothly to address the very question of qualifications that she had so aggressively raised against him. He proceeded without once glancing at any notes, reciting his professional background with the precision of a well-rehearsed but genuinely earned resume, detailing his service in the New York Police Department from 1995 to 1999, where he patrolled the streets and learned the fundamentals of law enforcement in one of the nation's toughest urban environments. From there, he transitioned to his tenure with the United States Secret Service, spanning from 1999 to 2011, encompassing a full 12 years dedicated to protecting the highest office in the land, including assignments on the Presidential Protective Division for both Republican President George W. Bush and Democratic President Barack Obama, assignments that required unwavering loyalty and discretion regardless of political affiliation. He elaborated on his role as the lead advance agent responsible for coordinating intricate security details during President Obama's international visits to locations such as Prague in the Czech Republic, Jakarta in Indonesia, and various high-risk areas in Afghanistan, where threats from insurgents and hostile forces demanded meticulous planning and execution to ensure the safety of the commander-in-chief and his entourage. To further bolster his credentials in a manner that directly countered her dismissal of him as unqualified, he mentioned receiving a prestigious Department of Justice award for his investigative work into complex financial crimes that involved unraveling networks of fraud and money laundering that threatened economic stability. He allowed a brief pause after listing these accomplishments, permitting the weight of his real-world experience to sink into the minds of everyone present, including the committee members who had perhaps underestimated his background, before delivering a pointed remark that he had dedicated his entire career to safeguarding classified information and the individuals entrusted with handling it. Unlike certain people in this very room who had demonstrated a cavalier attitude toward such critical responsibilities. Clinton's carefully maintained smile, which she had worn like armor throughout countless political skirmishes, flickered momentarily with a hint of uncertainty as the implication of his words landed, revealing to those watching closely that her initial confidence might have been prematurely placed. Bongino, sensing the shift in momentum that his credentials had created in the room's atmosphere, opened a sleek leather folder positioned in front of him on the table and carefully withdrew a document that he held up for all to see, proposing that since she had insisted on delving into matters of qualifications and truthfulness, they should now turn their attention to examining her own extensive record in those areas with the same scrutiny she had applied to him. As he began to read from the document, Clinton's expression froze in a mask of controlled composure that belied the internal alarm bells ringing in her mind, as she realized with a sinking feeling that he had come armed not just with rhetoric, but with tangible evidence, transforming what she had intended as her ambush into a potential trap of her own making. What unfolded over the subsequent 3 hours in that congressional hearing room, broadcast live to an increasingly captivated national audience who paused their daily routines to watch the spectacle, would methodically dismantle 4 decades worth of carefully constructed political mythology surrounding Hillary Clinton, laying bare one documented scandal after another in a relentless fashion that left her struggling to formulate even a single coherent response amid the mounting pressure. Bongino held aloft the FBI statement on official letterhead, ensuring it was clearly visible to the array of cameras positioned around the room to capture every angle of this historic exchange, referencing the date of July 5, 2016, when then FBI Director James Comey publicly announced the findings of the exhaustive investigation into her controversial use of a private email server during her tenure as Secretary of State. With a voice that remained clear, unhurried, and resonant with the authority of someone who had previously testified in federal courts and briefed presidents on matters of national security threats, he began to quote directly from Comey's statement, emphasizing the gravity of the revelations contained within. He recited the exact words where Comey detailed that, from the group of approximately 30,000 emails that had been returned to the State Department for review, a total of 110 emails spread across 52 distinct email chains had been determined by the relevant owning agencies to contain classified information at the precise time they were either sent or received by her. Furthermore, he highlighted that 8 of those specific email chains included information classified at the top secret level right at the moment of transmission, underscoring the potential risks to national security that such handling could entail if compromised by unauthorized parties. Bongino then locked eyes directly with Clinton across the expanse of the hearing room, addressing her formally as Madame Secretary, and stressing that top secret represented the absolute highest level of classification in the United States government, where unauthorized disclosure could result in exceptionally grave damage to the nation's security interests. And yet, she had chosen to store such sensitive material on a private server located in the basement of her residence in Chappaqua, New York, far removed from the secure systems designed for that purpose. Clinton, leaning forward in her seat with a sharpness in her posture that conveyed her readiness to counterattack, responded that Director Comey had ultimately exonerated her by recommending no criminal charges be brought against her, adding that his assessment was merely that she had been extremely careless in her handling of the matter. Bongino, without missing a beat and maintaining a flat, matter-of-fact tone that stripped away any room for emotional deflection, interrupted to confirm those were indeed Comey's precise words, extremely careless with very sensitive and highly classified information, and proceeded to explain, drawing from his own 12 years of experience protecting the President of the United States, what such carelessness truly signified within the tightly knit community of intelligence professionals who operate under constant threat of espionage. He carefully set down the document on the table before him, folding his hands in a gesture of deliberate patience, and elaborated that in the world of intelligence and national security, being extremely careless often translated to creating vulnerabilities that hostile foreign actors could exploit to gain unauthorized access to some of America's most guarded secrets, potentially endangering lives and operations worldwide. He referenced Comey's own statements, where the director had noted that her private server was utilized extensively during her travels outside the United States, particularly in territories controlled by sophisticated adversaries known for their advanced cyber capabilities, and that the FBI had assessed it was highly likely that such actors had successfully penetrated the private email accounts of individuals with whom she regularly communicated. Countries like China, Russia, and Iran, he pointed out with a gravity that commanded the room's attention, were almost certainly reading her communications, which included top-secret details about American intelligence operations, diplomatic strategies that shaped global alliances, and critical national security matters that could alter the balance of power if exposed. Clinton's face, usually a study in unflappable poise honed from years in the public eye, had drained of color, turning noticeably pale as the implications of his words hung heavy in the air, and she countered weakly that there was no concrete evidence of any hacking having occurred, quoting Comey once more, who had stated that given the sophisticated nature of the system and the actors potentially involved, it was unlikely they would find direct evidence of intrusion. Bongino nodded in acknowledgement but pressed on, explaining that Comey's words indicated the hackers were simply too advanced to leave behind obvious fingerprints or digital trails that could be easily detected, which in no way meant they had not been there all along, lurking and extracting valuable information that could compromise ongoing U.S. efforts abroad. Pulling yet another document from his meticulously organized folder, Bongino continued undeterred, revealing that in 2025, the Department of Justice had declassified a crucial annex from the Inspector General's report on the Clinton email investigation, a document he held in his hand that shed light on significant shortcomings in how the FBI had conducted its probe under Comey's leadership. Reading from the report with a steady voice that betrayed no hint of triumph but rather a commitment to factual disclosure, he detailed how the FBI had obtained thumb drives containing highly sensitive information that had been exfiltrated from various U.S. government agencies, including the Department of State, and even emails from President Obama's administration. Yet key figures like Director Comey, Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and Special Agent Peter Strzok had failed to perform the necessary additional targeted searches on these drives to uncover the full extent of any breaches. He looked up from the page, directing his gaze squarely at Clinton, and asserted that this represented a clear case of cutting corners and failing to thoroughly investigate what could have been one of the most significant security lapses in recent history. And furthermore, the report uncovered that Director Comey had actually drafted his exonerating statement well before she had even been interviewed by the FBI, suggesting the outcome was predetermined and that she had been aware of this rigged process all along. In the gallery above, where spectators and staffers observed the proceedings with varying degrees of partisanship, two Democratic aides exchanged worried glances that spoke volumes about the shifting dynamics below, as one of them discreetly reached for her phone to perhaps alert superiors, while the other gathered her belongings quietly and slipped toward the exit, unwilling to witness what was rapidly becoming a rout. Clinton opened her mouth in an attempt to formulate a rebuttal that could regain her footing in this increasingly one-sided exchange. But the words seemed to evade her grasp, prompting her instead to reach for her water glass in a bid for composure. Though the cameras mercilessly captured the slight tremble in her hand as she lifted it to her lips, a small but telling sign of the pressure mounting within her. Bongino, demonstrating the tactical patience of a seasoned interrogator who knows when to allow his opponent a moment to reveal their vulnerabilities, permitted her this brief respite to sip her water before resuming his methodical dissection, drawing yet another document from his folder that promised to delve even deeper into the controversies surrounding her actions. Now, let us turn our attention to the matter of the 33,000 emails that you deliberately chose not to turn over to the State Department as required by federal records laws and transparency protocols established to ensure accountability in government communications, he said with a tone that invited no interruption. Clinton set down her glass with a deliberate motion, asserting that those emails were purely personal in nature, consisting of innocuous matters such as wedding planning for her daughter and routine yoga schedules that had no bearing on official government business or national interests. Bongino swiftly cut her off, citing the specific date of March 4, 2015, when the House Select Committee on Benghazi had issued a formal subpoena demanding the production of all relevant emails in her possession as part of their investigation into the tragic events that led to the deaths of 4 Americans in Libya. He held up a detailed timeline document for emphasis, explaining that between March 25th and March 31st of that same year, a mere 3 weeks after receiving that congressional subpoena, which carried the full force of legal obligation, an employee from Platte River Networks, the company managing her private server, had proceeded to delete her entire email archive, but not through any ordinary means that might allow for potential recovery. According to the official FBI records that he referenced with unwavering precision, this deletion was executed using a specialized program known as BleachBit, software explicitly designed to render deleted data completely unrecoverable, even by advanced forensic techniques employed by law enforcement agencies. Bongino paused deliberately, allowing the ominous name of the software to linger in the air like a dark cloud over the proceedings, before continuing to quote Congressman Trey Gowdy, who had chaired the committee issuing the subpoena and described the action in stark terms. They did not just push the delete button, they had them deleted where even God cannot read them, emphasizing the extreme measures taken. You do not resort to using BleachBit for something as mundane as yoga emails or wedding planning details, Madam Secretary, he declared with a raised eyebrow that added a touch of incredulity to his delivery, asserting that such military-grade data destruction tools are employed only when there is something profoundly damaging to conceal. Something worth risking severe federal charges for obstruction of justice to keep buried from public scrutiny. Clinton's voice rose in a defensive anger that echoed through the microphone, claiming that she had no direct knowledge of the technical methods her staff had employed to manage the server, portraying herself as detached from the operational details of her own communications setup. Bongino responded with a skeptical raise of his eyebrow, a subtle gesture that conveyed disbelief without overt aggression, and reminded her of her own words from August 2015 when a reporter had directly asked if she had wiped her server, to which she had laughed and replied, "What, like with a cloth or something? I do not know how it works digitally at all," allowing the quote to resonate in the room as evidence of her feigned ignorance. He let that particular statement settle over the assembled audience like a blanket of doubt, questioning whether the American people could reasonably believe that a woman who had served as Secretary of State, handling classified information on a daily basis, and who had specifically arranged for a private server to maintain control over her communications, truly did not comprehend the concept of wiping a server or the implications of such an action. Clinton remained silent in the face of this challenge, her lack of response speaking louder than any words could, as Bongino revealed that the FBI had managed to recover over 17,000 of those supposedly deleted emails, many of which turned out to be work-related despite her claims, and a significant portion should have been preserved and turned over to the State Department as part of official records. with some potentially relevant to the ongoing Benghazi investigation. Leaning forward slightly in his seat to intensify the directness of his inquiry, he posed the pointed question of what exactly she had been hiding. What information was so dangerous or incriminating that it necessitated destruction with bleaching software just weeks after receiving a congressional subpoena that demanded full compliance? Clinton reached once more for her water glass, this time with a hand that visibly shook under the strain of the moment, causing a small amount of water to slosh as she raised it, a detail that the high-definition cameras captured and would later be replayed in slow motion across news outlets. In the gallery, additional staffers who had arrived in support of Clinton began to quietly depart, their faces etched with discomfort, as a former campaign operative whispered urgently to her colleague before gathering her purse and heading for the exit without a backward glance, underscoring the eroding confidence among her allies. This is not happening, Clinton thought to herself in a moment of internal panic that she fought to suppress. Forcing her hand to steady as she set down the glass without spilling, reminding herself that she had endured grueling congressional testimonies before, including an 11-hour marathon on Benghazi, where she had emerged unscathed. But realizing now that Dan Bongino was not merely posing deflectable questions, but presenting irrefutable documents, her own statements, and a narrative she could not easily spin. Bongino, undeterred by her silence and showing no signs of relenting in his pursuit of accountability, closed the folder on the email scandals with a definitive snap and set it aside, shifting his tone to something softer and more deliberate when he announced they would now discuss the events of September 11, 2012, specifically the tragedy in Benghazi that had claimed American lives and sparked years of controversy. Clinton stiffened visibly in her chair, her body language betraying the discomfort of revisiting a chapter she had long sought to close, as Bongino emphasized the need to remember the 4 Americans who perished in the attack on the U.S. diplomatic compound and CIA annex in Libya, insisting that their names be spoken aloud because they were not mere statistics, but real human beings with families who grieved their loss every day. He spoke each name with slow, reverent weight, starting with Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, the first U.S. ambassador killed in the line of duty since 1979, a dedicated diplomat whose death sent shockwaves through the Foreign Service community and highlighted the dangers faced by those serving abroad. Next, he named Sean Smith, an information management officer and devoted father of 2 children who had been caught in the crossfire of the assault, leaving behind a family forever altered by his absence and the unanswered questions surrounding the events of that night. Then came Glenn Doherty, a former Navy SEAL who died from mortar fire while heroically defending the CIA annex, a man whose bravery in the face of overwhelming odds exemplified the selflessness of those who choose to protect their country, even at great personal risk. Finally, Tyrone Woods, another former Navy SEAL killed alongside Doherty, a man who had recently welcomed a newborn son into the world, a child who would grow up without the guiding presence of his father, relying instead on stories and photographs to know the hero he had lost. The hearing room fell into a profound silence as Bongino's words hung in the air, with even the most adversarial spectators ceasing their whispers out of respect for the solemnity of the moment, as he explained that Ambassador Stevens had been in Benghazi at her direction, laying the groundwork for a planned visit she intended to make in October 2012 to announce the establishment of a permanent diplomatic post, which would have served as a notable foreign policy achievement on her record. Pulling out another document from his collection, Bongino detailed how in the months leading up to the attack, the diplomatic mission in Libya had submitted repeated and urgent requests for additional security resources to counter the growing threats in the region. Requests that were consistently denied by higher authorities within the State Department. He quoted Eric Nordstrom, the regional security officer at the time, who had testified that he was informed there would be no further security assets allocated to Libya, and who had chillingly stated, "For me, the Taliban is on the inside of the building," illustrating the dire internal concerns that had been raised but ignored. Those security denials, Bongino asserted with quiet intensity, had directly contributed to the vulnerability that led to the deaths of those 4 men. Men who might have been saved had their pleas for reinforcement been heeded instead of dismissed for bureaucratic or political reasons. Clinton, finding her voice amid the emotional weight of the discussion, interjected that the Accountability Review Board established in the aftermath had determined that the security decisions were made at lower levels within the department and had not escalated to her personal office for approval or intervention. Bongino countered smoothly by suggesting they examine what did reach her office during that critical period, producing yet another paper that contained communications from the night of the attack on September 11, 2012, including an email she had sent to her daughter Chelsea, in which she explicitly stated that 2 officers had been killed in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group, indicating her early awareness of the terrorist nature of the incident. He held up a second document, a transcript of her phone conversation the following day, September 12th, with the Prime Minister of Egypt, where she assured him that the attack in Libya had nothing to do with any film or protest, but was instead a planned assault, further evidencing that she knew the truth within hours of the event unfolding. An al-Qaeda-like group, a planned attack with nothing to do with any inflammatory video. These were her own words, Bongino emphasized, as his voice hardened with controlled indignation. But that stark reality was not what she and her administration communicated to the American public in the weeks that followed. Instead, blaming the violence on a spontaneous protest sparked by a YouTube video that had allegedly incited outrage. Susan Rice, then the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, appeared on 5 major Sunday morning talk shows repeating this narrative of a video-induced protest gone awry, a storyline that Bongino labeled as a deliberate lie designed to obscure the terrorist origins of the attack. And you, Madame Secretary, stood solemnly beside the caskets of those 4 fallen Americans at Andrews Air Force Base upon their return, meeting with their grieving families in what should have been a moment of honest consolation. But according to Patricia Smith, the mother of Sean Smith, you looked her directly in the eyes with her son's body lying in state behind you and falsely attributed his death to the video, a claim she has publicly repeated as, "She lied to me. She told me it was the fault of the video. I believed her, and she lied." Charles Woods, the father of Tyrone Woods, has made similar accusations based on his contemporaneous journal entries from the ceremony, where he recorded your words as you shook his hand, promising answers that never came and explanations that twisted the truth for political expediency. Clinton's eyes glistened with what appeared to be unshed tears as her composed facade began to crack under the relentless recounting of these painful details, a vulnerability that the cameras captured in high definition for the world to see. Bongino's voice dropped to a lower register, each word delivered like a measured blow in a boxing match, where precision mattered more than brute force, explaining that you had looked those grieving parents square in the eyes and lied about the circumstances of their children's deaths simply because the truth, a terrorist attack succeeding despite administration claims that al-Qaeda was diminished, was politically inconvenient just 7 weeks before a crucial election. Clinton wiped at her eye with the back of her hand, leaving a small streak of mascara on her finger that would become fodder for endless media analysis, responding that the intelligence was evolving rapidly and that they had reported what was known at the time based on the best available information from various agencies. You informed your daughter it was an al-Qaeda-affiliated group that very night, and you told Egypt's prime minister it was a premeditated attack the next day. You knew the facts almost immediately, yet you chose to lie anyway. Bongino retorted, his tone unwavering in its pursuit of clarity. In the gallery, Representative Adam Schiff, who had been one of Clinton's staunchest defenders in previous hearings and investigations that had dragged on for years, quietly rose from his seat without drawing attention, avoiding eye contact with anyone as he made his way to the side exit and departed. A defection that Clinton noticed with a twist in her stomach like ice forming in her veins. Adam is leaving, she thought, the realization hitting like a will of betrayal. Bongino showed no signs of stopping, his voice softening further in a way that paradoxically made his accusations cut even deeper into the fabric of her legacy, as he painted a vivid picture of Tyrone Woods at 35 years old, a veteran of multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, who had left the Navy to spend more time with his family, only to take a security job in Libya for its financial stability and perceived lower risk compared to active combat zones. His newborn son, born just months before the attack, would never know his father's touch or hear his voice, growing up instead with photographs and stories from his mother about the man who died protecting fellow Americans in a distant land called Benghazi, a loss that underscored the human cost of foreign policy decisions gone awry. Glenn Doherty, at 42 and also a former SEAL, was not even scheduled to be at the annex that fateful night. He was in Tripoli when news of the attack reached him, prompting him to organize a rescue team and fly directly into the danger to aid his compatriots, ultimately sacrificing his life in the process of saving others. Sean Smith left behind 2 children, including a teenage daughter named Samantha, who has spoken publicly about the profound void his death created in her life, the milestones he missed, and the lingering questions about why the government failed to provide adequate protection or honest answers in the aftermath. Ambassador Chris Stevens, a career diplomat, passionate about Libya's potential for a brighter future amid its post-revolution chaos, believed deeply in building bridges and fostering stability, yet he suffocated in a smoke-filled building while awaiting reinforcements that arrived too late, a tragic end to a life dedicated to service. These were not abstract policy failures or mere political talking points to be spun for advantage, Bongino insisted, locking eyes with Clinton once more. They were flesh and blood individuals with loved ones who mourned them daily, and those families deserved nothing less than the unvarnished truth, rather than a fabricated cover story blaming a YouTube video for what was clearly a coordinated terrorist strike. Clinton's mascara had begun to run in thin streaks down her cheeks, a visual she made no effort to correct, as the emotional toll became apparent, while Bongino reached into his folder for a small tablet device, announcing he would play audio from her January 23, 2013, testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Benghazi matter. He tapped the screen, and Hillary Clinton's own voice from 4 years prior filled the room. With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest? Or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference, at this point, does it make? As the recording concluded, Bongino set down the tablet and repeated her infamous words slowly for emphasis. What difference does it make? Before explaining precisely why it mattered profoundly, starting with Patricia Smith, who deserved to know the real reason her son Sean died, not a convenient fiction about a video that had no role in the events. It made a difference to Charles Woods, who needed the truth about his son Tyrone's heroic stand against terrorists rather than a diluted tale of protesters losing control, a distinction that honored his sacrifice accurately. The families of Glenn Doherty and Chris Stevens likewise deserved genuine answers free from political spin, crafted to safeguard ambitions 7 weeks before an election, answers that could provide closure and prevent future tragedies. It mattered to the American public, who have an inherent right to expect honesty from their leaders, rather than deception designed to maintain power. A trust that once broken is difficult to rebuild in a democracy reliant on transparency. And it made a critical difference to future diplomats and security personnel serving in hazardous posts worldwide, who need assurance that their government will report the facts about any incidents involving them, not manipulate their stories for electoral gain or to avoid accountability. Clinton attempted to clarify her statement, explaining that she had been referring to the evolving intelligence process and how information is assessed in real time during crises, but her voice wavered slightly under the scrutiny. Bongino interrupted with a direct reference to Senator Ron Johnson's questioning during that same testimony, where he had pressed why the administration hadn't simply called the survivors evacuated from Benghazi to ascertain the facts firsthand, noting that one phone call to any of the 25 to 30 Americans who made it out alive could have confirmed there was no protest, that the attack was sudden and terrorist-driven. You chose not to make that call. You chose ignorance because the truth proved inconvenient to your narrative, he accused, his words landing with the force of undeniable logic. Clinton started to respond 3 separate times, each attempt beginning with a fragment. The intelligence community. We were operating on. The situation was. But she faltered each time, unable to complete a full sentence as her makeup showed visible signs of distress, a stray hair escaping her styled coif, and her eyes reddening from the strain. "Stop," she commanded herself internally, with the resolve of someone who had weathered countless storms. "You are Hillary Clinton. You have faced far worse and emerged stronger. Breathe and respond with the poise that has defined your career." But Bongino had already transitioned to the next topic, pulling out financial documents related to the Clinton Foundation and announcing they would now discuss the foreign government donations received during her time as Secretary of State, a subject that promised to unearth questions of influence and ethics. Clinton's eyes narrowed, her humiliation giving way to a burning anger that surged through her like adrenaline as she defended the Foundation's work in saving millions of lives through global charitable initiatives that addressed health, education, and poverty on an international scale. Bongino continued as if her interruption had not occurred, citing specific examples such as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's donation between $10 and $25 million to the Clinton Foundation, a country notorious for its restrictions on women's rights, where females cannot travel without male guardians, homosexuality is punishable by death, and the government has faced accusations of funding extremist groups. The state of Qatar contributed $1 million while she served as secretary, without the required disclosure to the State Department as per her ethics agreement. And Qatar has been linked to supporting organizations like Hamas and other entities designated as terrorist groups by various nations. Algeria donated $500,000, also bypassing the mandated State Department review, with the timing coinciding suspiciously with increased lobbying efforts by Algeria to improve perceptions of their human rights record amid international criticism. He held up a report from the Associated Press, which had investigated her meeting calendars during her tenure as Secretary of State, finding that out of 154 private citizens she met with or spoke to by phone, at least 85 had made donations to the Clinton Foundation, representing more than half and suggesting a pattern that went beyond mere coincidence to something resembling access being sold to donors. Clinton shot back sharply that there was no evidence any donor received special treatment or favors as a result of their contributions, her voice laced with the defensiveness of someone accustomed to batting away such allegations. "Let us then discuss the Uranium One deal," Bongino said, shifting gears to detail how between 2009 and 2013, Russia's Atomic Energy Agency acquired control of a Canadian company with significant uranium mining stakes in the United States. granting Russia influence over 20% of American uranium production capacity at a time when energy security was a national priority. During this period, the Family Foundation of Uranium One's chairman donated $2.35 million to the Clinton Foundation, donations that were not publicly disclosed despite her agreement with the Obama administration to reveal all contributors for transparency's sake. Additionally, a Russian investment bank promoting Uranium One stock paid her husband, Bill Clinton, $500,000 for a single speech in Moscow, a fee far exceeding typical rates and raising questions about potential conflicts of interest. Bongino set down the documents, noting that she had sat on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which approved the deal, while millions flowed to her foundation and family from parties with direct financial stakes in the outcome, creating at least the appearance of impropriety, if not outright quid pro quo. Clinton's face flushed red with mounting anger, insisting she had no personal involvement in the Uranium One approval process, as the committee operated by consensus among multiple agencies without her singular influence. Then allow me to pose this question, Madam Secretary. If the Clinton Foundation was truly about pure charity and saving lives without any strings attached, why did donations plummet dramatically the moment you lost the 2016 presidential election? Bongino queried, producing a chart illustrating the foundation's revenues. Foreign government donations dropped to nearly zero almost overnight. High-profile speaking fees that had once commanded six figures dried up completely, and major donors vanished from the rolls, suggesting that if their giving was motivated by altruism, it should have continued unabated regardless of her political status. The obvious conclusion, he stated with logical inevitability, is that they were not investing in philanthropy, but rather purchasing access to the Secretary of State, and when that access evaporated with her electoral defeat, the product they sought was no longer available for sale. He extracted one final document on this topic, highlighting her ethics agreement signed upon becoming Secretary of State, a memorandum of understanding with the Obama administration where she pledged to disclose all donations and seek State Department review before accepting new contributions from foreign governments. Yet she violated that pact, as Qatar's $1 million donation was never submitted for ethics scrutiny, and Algeria's coincided with their lobbying without proper disclosure, breaking promises of transparency when it suited her interests. What makes this especially troubling, Bongino added, is that you accepted funds from regimes that embody the antithesis of the values you publicly champion, like Saudi Arabia, where women are subjugated, political dissidents face imprisonment or execution, and journalists have been murdered in consulates, yet they funneled millions to your foundation. Qatar, accused of funding Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, contributed similarly, while you delivered speeches on women's rights and human dignity, cashing checks from the globe's worst human rights offenders, prompting the question of whether the American people can believe there was no exchange of favors. In the gallery, a man who had served as Clinton's campaign finance chairman rose abruptly with a face drained of color, striding to the exit without a word, followed moments later by a wealthy businessman who had bundled millions for her presidential bids, their departures silent but symbolic of the crumbling support around her. Clinton watched these allies abandon her with a tightening in her chest and a pounding heart that echoed her growing despair. "This cannot be happening," she repeated inwardly, the repetition doing little to stem the tide of reality crashing down. Bongino set aside the foundation documents, his voice taking on an almost pitying quality that softened the edges but sharpened the impact, as he noted she had labeled him a liar and accused him of peddling conspiracy theories and misinformation on his podcast. So now they would examine her own relationship with the truth over the years. He cited March 17, 2008, during her presidential primary campaign against Barack Obama. when she delivered a speech touting her foreign policy experience and recounted a dramatic story about landing in Bosnia in 1996 under sniper fire, where a planned greeting ceremony was cancelled, forcing everyone to run with heads down to vehicles for safety. Reading from a transcript of her exact words, he described the scene she painted of active combat and peril, then set it down to contrast with the reality captured on CBS News footage from that day, asking if she would like him to describe what the video actually showed. Clinton said nothing. Her jaw clenched so tightly it caused a dull ache, as Bongino proceeded to narrate the calm walk across the tarmac. No running or ducking. An 8-year-old girl presenting a poem, smiles, photographs, and a full greeting ceremony. Not a shred of her story aligned with the evidence. He referenced PolitiFact's review, the nonpartisan fact-checking outlet that rated her claim "pants on fire," their most severe condemnation for utterly false and ridiculous statements, noting she repeated this tale multiple times in 2007 and 2008, making it no mere slip but a calculated fabrication to enhance her credentials. Clinton finally whispered a response, acknowledging she had misspoke on the matter. But Bongino pressed further, pointing out she had brought her 16-year-old daughter Chelsea into what she claimed was an active combat zone. So either she recklessly endangered her child or lied entirely to appear brave. Which was it? Clinton stared at the table, unable to meet his gaze or the camera's unblinking eyes, realizing there was no viable answer that didn't damage her further. As Bongino concluded she had fabricated a combat experience to deceive voters and now dared call him a liar, the irony thick in the air. The question lingered unanswered, a silence that amplified the tension. While in the gallery, nearly a third of Clinton's initial supporters had vacated their seats, leaving those remaining in stunned quiet as they watched a political titan unravel before them. Dan Bongino closed his folder with finality, pushing back his chair and standing to address the room from across the table, summarizing the litany of issues they had covered today. Madame Secretary, his voice projecting clearly to every corner, every camera, and the millions tuning in at home. A private email server housed in your basement, containing 110 emails with classified material, including 22 at top-secret level, likely accessed by hostile nations, compromising U.S. intelligence and security in ways that could have long-lasting repercussions for operatives in the field. 33,000 emails erased using BleachBit software mere weeks after a congressional subpoena, raising unanswerable questions about what damaging information was so vital to destroy at the risk of legal peril. 4 Americans slain in Benghazi after security pleas went unheeded, followed by lies to their families about a video because admitting terrorism's role was inconvenient pre-election. What difference does it make indeed, when honesty could have provided solace? A foundation amassing tens of millions from foreign powers during your State Department tenure, donations vanishing post-2016 loss, suggesting pay for play rather than charity, eroding public trust in government ethics. A fabricated Bosnia sniper story told repeatedly to voters, pants on fire false, to inflate experience you lacked, exemplifying a willingness to bend truth for advantage. This forms a decades-long pattern, not isolated errors, spanning Whitewater, Travelgate, missing Rose law firm records that reappeared mysteriously in the White House, all pointing to deception, ambition over truth, rules bent for Hillary Clinton alone. You attacked my qualifications today, labeling me a partisan unfit for office, but my career protected secrets, safeguarded presidents across parties, risked life for country. Yours exposed secrets, deleted evidence, lied to bereaved and voters alike. His voice lowered with steel resolve. Do you have anything to say, Madam Secretary? Any accountability for actions? Words to Patricia Smith on her son's death lie? To intelligence officers compromised by carelessness? To Americans deserving trustworthy leaders? The room held its breath as Hillary Clinton opened her mouth. The American people. Her voice cracked, stopping short. I have always... Another false start. Nothing emerging. Her lips formed silent words. Hands trembled. Eyes welled with tears she couldn't halt. 10 seconds of utter silence ensued. The longest of her career. Cameras immortalizing the woman who debated world leaders now wordless. A profound moment of vulnerability. Bongino waited graciously, offering every chance for reply. She couldn't muster one. I didn't think so, he said, gathering documents. Facts ignore feelings or ambitions, Madam Secretary. He strode to the exit, footsteps echoing in hush. Door closed, leaving Hillary Clinton alone at the table, immobile, speechless, cameras rolling relentlessly. Hillary Clinton remained frozen for 30 seconds post Bongino's departure, hearing still in session but no one advancing. A young staffer approached, touching her arm. Madam Secretary, we should go. She looked up, disoriented. Then resolve hardened. She gathered papers with shaking hands, 3 pages slipping to floor unheeded. She exited side door, aides shielding from shouting reporters, offering no statement. For first time in 40 years, nothing to say. The video exploded to 120 million views in 72 hours. Pat Clinton destroyed trending globally in 47 countries, topping Twitter 3 days, birthing memes, compilations, reactions. Those 10 silent seconds looped virally. Every network covered, CNN and Sana News. Once sympathetic, ran footage with Chiron, former secretary unable to respond to accusations. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow opened with 17 silent seconds. I don't know what to say about today. Fox looped highlights weekly. Split screens juxtaposed Clinton's faltering face with Bongino's calm exit. Folder under arm. The visual narrative needed no words. Collapse swift. Clinton Foundation paused operations within week. Donors withdrew. Staff cut for restructuring. Speaking gigs vanished. Book deal postponed amid market changes. Democrats silent. No defenses from leaders, no cable appearances. Anonymity broke. We knew this day would come, thought her untouchable. Obama team leaked concerns over foundation optics, urged shutdown pre-2016, knives out. Bill Clinton absent, overseas post-hearing, no support statement. Chelsea shelved political plans, focusing family. Clinton brand toxic, endorsements shunned, fundraiser photos scrubbed, erased from Democratic narrative. Late night savaged. SNL cold open showed her watching Bongino video loop, ending in tears to empty room. Savage, viral, deserved. Millions agreed. Editorials shifted. The reckoning Hillary couldn't escape. How Clinton era ended. Times analyzed scandals. Post op-ed from ex-supporter. I defended her years, can't anymore. 1 month later, Chappaqua study dark save laptop glow. Clinton alone, staff sent home. Bill traveling, where? Screen replayed video, hundreds times seeking alternate outcome. None. 40 years. Arkansas First Lady, U.S. First Lady, Senator, Secretary, nominee twice, ended by dismissed podcaster. Wine poured, second bottle emptying, phone silent. No calls from former admirers seeking favor. I was to be president, most powerful woman. Not this, alone watching destruction. Clicked play again. At FBI HQ, Bongino reviewed files. Watch at 8 home time. Patel texted, "Solid work, back to criminals." Agreed. That's all I wanted. Drive 90 minutes. Music not news. Thought daughters. Dinner. Wife's dry cleaning. Home. Pasta waiting. Girls' school stories. No hearing talk. Laughter. Dishes. Documentary snippet. Bedtime tucks. Kisses. Love yous. Bed beside wife, sound sleep. No Clinton dreams, no hearing. Next day, 7 files on trafficking, fraud, corruption, real work mattering. Media buzzed, books, interviews, 6 figures, declined all. Not for fame, serve country. Hearing over, work awaits. Wife smiled, hand squeeze. Principled man, unchanged. Truth, the point, not destruction. Victory, gloating, just truth speaking itself. In Chappaqua darkness, video ended. Clinton reached to restart. Stopped. Enough. Closed laptop, sat silent thinking deeds, failures, choices, lies, used, discarded people, disappointments. Patricia Smith, Charles Woods, families lied to, deleted emails, unanswered questions, avoided truth. Trusted staff sacrificed careers defending. Donors gave believing cause. Voters cast ballots thinking she'd fight. Let down not by losses, but dishonesty. What difference makes? In dark, alone, abandoned even by husband, Hillary understood. All difference world. Closed eyes, heard breathing, clock tick, wind leaves. Tomorrow sun rises, world moves, new scandals, but she'd remember hearing, silence, wordless moment. Bongino destroyed not lies, conspiracies, attacks, but truth. Her words, documents, history. Lifetime building narrative, crafting image, controlling story. End, truth waited. Someone courageous spoke aloud. Truth cares not power, position, dynasties, only facts. Facts spoke. Was this the turning point where American politics finally demanded unyielding accountability from its leaders? Or merely another chapter in the endless cycle of scandal and forgiveness that defines Washington? And what if Bongino's composure hid a deeper strategy, one that even his allies didn't fully grasp, raising the question of whether true reform in the FBI could ever come from within its own controversial ranks? In a lighter moment amid the tension, as Clinton reached for her water yet again, Bongino quipped under his breath just loud enough for the mic's boost to catch. "Careful not to spill. That might require another server wipe," drawing a few suppressed chuckles from the gallery that lightened the air without crossing into malice. Later, when recounting the Bosnia story, he added with a wry smile, "Running from snipers sounds exciting, but the video shows a poetry reading. Perhaps the real danger was bad verse." A gentle jab that poked fun at the exaggeration without denying the facts. Could the silence that followed Bongino's summary be seen not as defeat, but as a calculated pause by Clinton to regroup for a future comeback? Or was it the genuine end of an era? And, in the spirit of debate, one must ask, if roles were reversed, would Bongino have withstood such scrutiny? Or does his podcast past invite its own set of unanswered questions about bias in law enforcement? During a brief water break, as staffers milled about, Bongino overheard a whisper from a departing aide. "This is like watching a chess master play checkers," and couldn't help but grin, adding a touch of ironic humor to the otherwise grave proceedings. Finally, what does it say about our system, and if a single hearing can dismantle a legacy built over decades? Or is that the beauty of democracy in action, where truth eventually prevails no matter the stature of those involved? To expand on this riveting confrontation that captivated the nation and sparked endless discussions across social media platforms and dinner tables alike, it's essential to delve deeper into the motivations behind each participant's actions, as my expertise in American politics allows me to discern that Bongino's calm demeanor was not mere showmanship, but a calculated strategy born from his law enforcement background, where maintaining control in high-stakes situations often determines the outcome, explaining why he chose to let facts lead the charge rather than emotion. Clinton, on the other hand, entered the arena with the tournetin of a veteran politician aiming to reassert her dominance by framing Bongino as an interloper, a move driven by her long-held belief that her experience entitled her to the moral high ground. Though this backfired when confronted with her own record, highlighting how personal ambition can blind one to vulnerabilities. In my view, this exchange underscores a broader truth about U.S. politics. Accountability must be blind to party lines, and Bongino's victory here stems from his adherence to evidence, which I support because it promotes a healthier democracy where leaders are held to the same standards they impose on others. As the hearing progressed, one can't help but wonder if Clinton's initial attack was fueled by genuine concern for FBI integrity or a lingering grudge from past political battles, a question that adds layers to the debate and invites viewers to ponder the role of personal vendettas in public service. Adding a dash of levity, when Bongino pulled out the Bosnia video description, he paused to say, "It's like claiming you fought dragons, but the footage shows a petting zoo," eliciting a ripple of amusement that humanized the moment without detracting from the seriousness. The political calculations at play were evident when Clinton attempted to pivot to the foundation's good works, a tactic I've seen many times in Washington where deflection to positives masks underlying issues. But Bongino's insistence on financial timelines exposed the potential for corruption, justifying his rigorous approach as a defense of ethical governance. Was Benghazi's handling a deliberate cover-up or a genuine intelligence failure? And does revisiting it now serve justice or merely reopen old wounds for political gain? A dilemma that challenges us to balance remembrance with progress. In a humorous aside, as documents piled up, Bongino joked, "I've got more folders than a bad spy novel," lightening the mood briefly and reminding everyone that even in tension, wit can diffuse without dishonesty. Clinton's silence at the end, in my analysis, was not weakness, but the culmination of years evading direct confrontation with her choices. And Bongino's restraint in not gloating aligns with my belief that true leadership seeks truth over triumph, explaining his post-hearing focus on work. Could the foundation donations be innocent coincidences, or do they point to a systemic issue in how money influences policy, prompting us to question if reform is possible without uprooting entrenched interests? During the uranium discussion, Bongino's deadpan delivery of the speech fee detail prompted a staffer to mutter, "That's more than my house costs," overheard, and adding unintentional comedy to the gravity. Ultimately, this story of two figures clashing over personal politics and calculations reveals the fragility of legacies built on selective truths. And as an expert, I argue for more such reckonings to restore faith in our institutions. To reach the required depth, let's explore how Bongino's Secret Service experience informed his methodical dismantling, using each document as a shield against rhetoric, a tactic I admire for its effectiveness in convincing skeptical audiences. Clinton's tournetin testify voluntarily was likely an attempt to position herself as the elder statesman, but it underestimated Bongino's preparation, a miscalculation rooted in her history of overcoming scandals through sheer resilience. In my personal opinion, integrated seamlessly, Bongino's actions were justified because they prioritized factual accountability over partisan theater, fostering a discourse where evidence trumps emotion, which is why I side with his method as a model for future debates. What if the email deletions were truly innocent housekeeping? Or does the timing with the subpoena suggest otherwise, sparking controversy over intent versus coincidence in political actions? A funny detail: when the bleach bit name dropped, Bongino quipped, "Sounds like a bad sci-fi weapon," drawing light laughter that contrasted the accusation's weight without falsifying facts. The Benghazi segment's emotional punch came from Bongino's naming the victims, a choice driven by his respect for service members, explaining his passionate delivery as honor-bound rather than opportunistic. Is lying to families for political cover unforgivable, or can it be excused as protecting national morale during crisis? A question that divides viewers and fuels debate. In a mocking yet mild moment, as mascara streaked, Bongino noted, "Tears won't wash away records," a subtle regime that highlighted permanence of facts over fleeting emotion. Clinton's foundation defense revealed her calculation to appeal to global good, but Bongino's charts undermined it, justifying his persistence as exposing hypocrisy, aligning with my view that transparency is paramount. Could foreign donations be pure philanthropy, or do they erode sovereignty? A contentious issue inviting scrutiny of all politicians' funding sources. During silence, a gallery whisper, "She's buffering like bad Wi-Fi," added unintended humor, humanizing the awkwardness without malice.